Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We caught up earlier today with Patrick McGrath, who's CEO of Blue Moon Mining, their TSX-V listed polymetallic exploration company. And if you want our thoughts and opinions on that conversation, their project, and indeed the company itself, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports. There's market commentary from experts from around the world on a variety of commodities and companies. There are training videos, and also summaries of other interviews that we've done just to save you a little bit of time, and a thriving community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other. So do go along and join them at cruxinvestor.com/club. Of course, we love your feedback too. So do give us a like, leave your comments below. And if you want to see what we talked about, take a look in the description. Patrick, how are you doing, sir?
Good, Matthew. How are you?
Not too bad. How are things up in Halifax?
Not too bad. It's we're in a little bit of lockdown here, but it's it's not a bad place to be stuck.
That's not a bad part of the world indeed. Hey, well, thanks for coming on the show. Well, we've not spoken before, so I was keen to hear this story because I want to see what's happening in the world of zinc. You're going to update us, so that's good news. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a 1-minute overview on the business, and then I'll pick it up from there.
Sure. So our primary asset is the Blue Moon zinc deposit, and it's a polymetallic. So it's not just zinc, but it's primarily zinc. But it also has significant amounts of copper, gold, and silver. So what I like about it, it's a diversified deposit. So you're not relying on just one metal. And basically, it's a mix on the gross value of our metal in the ground. It's roughly 50-50 between base metals and 50% precious metals.
Okay, good split. Okay, tell me a bit about you. What's your background?
So I'm a CPA or a professional accountant. So my primarily my career path has been on the financing side, primarily in reorganizations and resource base between oil and gas and mining.
Right. Okay. So, any experience of running junior mining companies before?
Sure. So that's kind of where I learned the business. I was under a couple of great mentors. I had a couple of gentlemen that had founded Bema Gold and Eldorado Gold. I spent about 10 years with them. And what I really learned from them is, when you're starting out, you want to have a really great resource in front of you or under your feet. And that's what I really like about Blue Moon is we're starting out with 8 million tons of resource with the ability to expand that, significantly through exploration development. So that's really where, I learned the business is you want to start off with an asset that can make it to production.
Right. Okay. So, but this is the first company you've headed up. So you've put a team together. Where have they come from? Yeah.
So I think these are people I've worked with in the past. So Jack McClintock is a geologist and engineer. He's a former BHP, very high up on BHP's ladder. And what is significant about Jack is, he was involved in the worldwide exploration team at BHP, including he's founded the Spence deposit, which is one of the largest copper deposits in Chile while he was at BHP, and he won PDAC Mining Person of the Year for that. So a guy who has been there, done that, accomplished a lot in his career, and now helping me develop this asset. And also on the board is Douglas Urch. Doug is primarily on the oil and gas side, but involved in several very successful ventures on the oil and gas side that eventually got bought out for. I think he had 2 ventures that were bought out for $500 million each. So a strong team. And I've worked with each of those gentlemen at length in the past.
Right. And so they're a mixture of sort of oil and gas experience and some mining. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. So my technical guy is obviously on the mining side. Doug Urch is a CFO of those entities. So he's our audit committee chair and on the finance side.
Okay, well, we better get into it. So it's relatively new, and I think in 2020, everything moving at a slightly different pace. So can you tell me how you came into this project? Obviously, I'm focused on Blue Moon. I know you've got another project, but how did you acquire it? What did it cost? All that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit of an interesting background. It's, I was originally a shareholder. Myself and Jack knew about this asset. It's a former Boliden asset, and for those of you who don't know, Boliden, is one of the premier European base metal producers. So, when Boliden had a North American division, they had the 2 assets that we have, and primarily Blue Moon. So it's we knew we had this large resource of zinc that was sitting there in a pubco, but it was really not doing very much. So we accumulated a share position through the market. So I bought my position primarily through the market and got a large enough position that we took over the board and management team. So that's my involvement. Is I became a shareholder. I liked it so much that I eventually took over the company, and myself and Jack became the management and board.
Why do that? Why not just sit back and let that management team do their thing? Were they doing it wrong?
Well, no, they were just they were not doing anything with the asset. So it will come to the reason being is that the asset is in the United States and more particularly in California. So, there is I guess a perception there for a while that California was a no-go for mining companies. And so that's why the asset was laid dormant. It had actually been sitting in a pubco one iteration after another, but not doing any work for 20 years. And the reason why you can do that in some jurisdictions in the US is because the land tenure is so strong and it doesn't cost very much in holding costs. So you can keep that asset for a long period of time and not do any work. So that's what the previous team was doing. But what we really saw is a couple of major events. We saw the zinc market do very well. The supply-demand fundamentals started tipping in our favor. Zinc prices doing well. The second piece is that we saw a lot of projects in California, and in particular, one project that was an open pit heap leach in Southern California get through the permitting process and into commercial production. It was a real eye-opener for us. We contacted that gentleman that did that, the CEO of that company, and he became a shareholder of ours and helped us with really some getting step ups and introducing us to the environmental team that he used, introducing us to his legal counsel who he used to get through the permitting process. And that's where we educated ourselves and realized, California is open for business. It's one of the largest aggregate producers in North America. It has several large gold projects that are up and running and into commercial production.
We've had Equinox on here and a couple of companies yesterday, actually, bizarrely. But talk to me about the corporate structure, because when there's a kind of takeover situation like this, it gets a bit messy. So who's still involved with any legacy issues, I guess is what I'm getting at.
No legacy issues. I mean, it was a clean break. Once we did call a shareholders meeting and there was a clean transfer of power over, and we took over the full board and management team.
Right.
The prior team had focused on some exploration assets in Nevada, Quebec, and then they had this Blue Moon asset, but in the background. So what we did is, we realigned the company to focus on the Blue Moon, as we think it's a near-term and exploration upside potential on it, and eliminated the exploration assets that we felt didn't add value at this time.
Okay, so talk to me about the shareholders which were there when you arrived, because if this thing has been sitting and just being sort of not doing very much for a long time now, I think that's what you're saying to me, they must be desperate to get at and take their money with them. So again, are you having conversations with them to talk about the future or indeed their intent?
Yeah, so we took over the company, call it 2.5 years ago. So there was, like you said, there would be shareholders that were focused on other projects that the company was then working on. And then there was also shareholders that wanted to focus on Blue Moon. So you're right, there was probably two different camps. And it was just a matter of, when we started marketing the company, those that wanted to get out, got out, and those, that wanted to stay, stayed. And then we also got new shareholders that came in that liked what we were doing. And that's where we did have some turnover of shareholders, and now we think all our shareholders behind us it's been 2 years of dealing with Blue Moon, and we think shareholders that are there for the Blue Moon project.
Okay, so there's no overhang that you're concerned about coming down the line.
No.
Okay.
No, I think everything.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the project then. So what did you see there? Well, you must have known a bit about it. You were a shareholder yourself. So what information did you then get access to, having to have taken the asset over? Yeah,
so as I mentioned, Boliden and one of the other companies was called Westman at the time, and also Imperial Metals. They were kind of the trio that did the bulk of the work in the 80s, and they did extensive drilling. Behind the scenes, we have all the reports that they prepared. We have excellent catalog of the data that they did in terms of the drilling, the engineering. They did what I'll call pre-43-101 pre-feasibility studies. They did metallurgical work. So they did extensive work and actually brought it to the point where they applied for and received a permit to build a 600-foot shaft. And that was approved by the state of California. And unfortunately, Bleeden didn't go forward with it. But what it showed us, and we were able to get access to all that data, is that, they had the full permitting data that they put in place at that time. So we have a lot of material from that era. And, in today's dollar amount, that's probably worth $20-30 million. So it's great work. So that's the foundation of what we have. And then going forward, obviously, we've gone through, reanalyzed the data, and we see these new opportunities to expand the deposit, as well as in VMS deposits. They're often found in clusters. So it's a volcanic massive sulfide. And our deposit is near vertical, and we have the ground along strike. We believe there's a high probability, as most other VMS deposits, that there's going to be more of these deposits along strike. So our bigger picture plan is, we have 8 million tons in front of us. We obviously want to try to identify multiples of that and turn this into a larger scale project.
So how much money have you got?
Right now we've got probably $250,000.
Right.
What our game plan is to go to the capital markets probably early next year and put together some drilling and initial engineering funds.
So what's the last 2 years been about? Is it about getting the house in order, or waiting for the market to recover? What have you done during that time?
Yeah, so for the last 2 years, what we did is, we went out and did a small drill program about 2 years ago. The one significant hole that we drilled was probably one of the best holes ever drilled on the property. So, we were very happy. It showed that there's a high grade component to the deposit, and it showed it at good interval. The metal markets did come off, and what we ended up doing was a joint venture. So we did a joint venture with another entity, and they were to spend up to $11 million to earn a 70% interest. And they went out and did do an initial drill program in late 2019, very successful. But unfortunately, they weren't able to keep the funding going in 2020. And now that's going to, the whole project's 100% is going to revert back to Blue Moon.
So that was Platina. Was that Platina?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're completely out of it. They have no residual ownership of this.
They won't, because they won't be able to meet their stage one earning commitment.
When does that terminate officially?
It's officially terminates in February of 2021, so in a couple of months.
Okay.
So to answer your question, in the last 2 years, we drilled it. Then when the market was tight, we didn't want to dilute, so we did a joint venture. We had our joint venture partner come in, expend considerable funds and significant drill results. As a result of their inability to continue the full, they're supposed to drill 10,000 meters and they're not going to get there. It's going to revert 100% back to us. I'd also say too, the other thing we did is we cleaned up some of the NSRs. There was 2% NSR on the property, and we went out and acquired it during the middle of COVID at a very reasonable price. So just cleaning up the tenure as well.
Right, and you've also gone and raised $300,000 recently in September. I guess is that a reaction to Platina turning around and saying, "Hey, we're just not going to be there for you"?
Exactly. So what we're doing is we're just lining up capital with the idea that we're going to go out and we're going to get the property back 100%. And our goal always was to drill this ourselves. It just didn't make sense when the metal markets were soft. Now that we're getting it back 100% with new drill results, which makes the project even bigger and better, our plan is to go drill it ourselves.
So how much money, how many meters?
Our goal is probably to do 5,000 to 7,000 meters. And we think that would be, a mixture of development drilling. We want to move the resource from an inferred to indicated. We also have some expansion opportunities on the deposit. And what we really like is, and this is what Bleeden was going to do. Bleeden was going to do a 800-foot shaft, and they were going to drill at depth and show, instead of this is a 10-year mine life, they're going to show it's a 20-year mine life. So we think that's kind of lower hanging fruit. And Bleeden was going to do the shaft at that time because it was cheaper to drill from underground. With today's drilling technology, we don't think we need to drill put a shaft in. We can drill from surface. We think there's additional lenses along strike, and that would be a game changer if we could find another lens or two.
It would be, but it all takes money and it takes time, and you've got to hit these cycles right. So, and as a polymetallic, I guess different commodities shine at different points in the marketplace. So, right now, how are you positioning, or how will you be positioning when you go out to raise money in terms of telling the polymetallic story? Because again, people get a little bit confused about where the money's coming from.
Sure. So, I mean, if you're talking about the deposit itself, polymetallic obviously means multiple metals. In terms of output, it's primarily zinc. That would be the primary output. In terms of gross value, it's roughly 50-50 between base and precious. So in terms of numbers, I can tell you on our current resource itself, it's 750 million pounds of zinc on our current resource. Obviously, we want to expand that, but that's where it sits. In terms of precious metals, it's 300,000 ounces of gold, 10 million ounces of silver. So you can see it's not insignificant as a byproduct. And then, you turn that 8 million into 16 million tons or 15 million tons, you can see all of a sudden you're getting up to 500,000 ounces of gold and well over 1 billion pounds of zinc. So that's where the big picture story is for us.
Okay, so in terms of how you move this forward, you're going for 6,000 or 7,000 meters, great, and you've got existing works, you've got existing data. But in terms of moving the story through the market, you kind of need a bit of scale to kind of get people interested, don't you? So what does next year or the year after look like? How do you plan to progress the story?
Yeah, initially be the drill bit. So we think that's anytime you can increase the resource significantly, we think that would re-rate us. I think as soon as you go over 10 million tons, all of a sudden you get into a different category. If you can get up to the 12, 15 million tons, again, another notch up on categories. And then at a certain point in time, it will switch over from drilling to focusing on the engineering side. So you're talking PEA, pre-feasibility, additional metallurgical work. Showing that this thing can come together on an economic scale.
Okay, but I'm trying to work out where's that in your head? What is that moment in your head? What does the number need to be before you start to do the scoping study and start paying for scoping studies as opposed to drilling?
Yeah, I think it's probably in that 12, 15 million ton range. Right. I think once we think we can go out and do, we know we can do economic study on it as is right now. But what makes more sense is to drill it off. And see how big you can get it, and then start working on the engineering.
Right. Do you feel that you would still consider getting a JV partner in, perhaps somebody who's better suited to it? I know you've got one technical person there, but you're oil and gas guys as well. So if with specialist strategic money comes to you and says, "Hey, maybe we could do something here together," have you been put off by the Platina experience?
No, not at all. I mean, Platina, they advanced the project. We're very happy with the results that they came up with. So to answer your question, I'm the largest shareholder of this company. My fellow board members are significant shareholders. So we're going to do what's right for shareholders because we are, as a collective team, we own 20% of the company. I own roughly 15%. So, we're looking out for what makes sense for shareholders. And if it means bringing in the right partner with either technical skills or the right capital or the ability to move it along, then we would certainly look at that very closely.
Okay, thanks for that. Should we talk about your Nunavut project now?
Sure, it's a Yava property, and it's another legacy Boliden asset. As I mentioned, it was way back in time. It was a former VP that put together the Boliden North American assets and rolled them into a public vehicle. So the Yava property is in Nunavut. It's the significance is it's on a green belt that it's about 50 kilometers south of a major deposit called Hackett River, and the Hackett River is a major. It's another polymetallic deposit, another VMS deposit. I.e., that's why Boliden was putting together these assets in the day. It's currently owned by Glencore. It's around 50 million tons, I think 70 million between indicated and inferred. So it's a major deposit, and at some point in time, it will go into development. So that's a little bit more longer term. And that's why we focused on Blue Moon. Is Blue Moon's near term, it has infrastructure, it's within line of sight. Whereas the second project, it's a little bit longer down the path, but it's got great exploration potential. Like there's 5 holes put into the property and they have 1 million tons of resource. So it's something that you can go in and drill and make it bigger very quickly. It's just a little bit more costly to deal in northern conditions.
So there's a few other players up there. Have you been in discussions with some of those? So again, in terms of a JV type of arrangement.
You know what, we have an open dialogue with Glencore, because Glencore is obviously right next to us there, and they're at a pre-feasibility level. So what our goal is to keep in communication with them, and eventually someone's going to want to put that or consolidate that because it's a major project. It'd be a major infrastructure spend, but it's got some very large numbers, and it'd be an exciting project one day.
It will be, and I guess your challenge as the CEO of a junior company of 7 million market cap is to work out, again, how do you time this right? How do you finance these things, and how do you drive the value and retain value at the same time? I guess. So, what are the options you thought of? I know eventually it'll be suitable for someone, but wouldn't you rather get that going now?
We would, like I said, we've talked to the partner, or not partner, but the holder of that major deposit. So it's something that we'd like to see move forward sooner rather than later. It is held by one of the super majors, so it takes a little bit of time to work up a relationship there, and hopefully. Something can happen with that, whether it's us or whether it's other partner, and we can enjoy some more work and advancement of the project there.
So how are you finding being CEO of a junior mining company? Isn't it better easier being a shareholder?
I would say yes. It's obviously you have the ups and downs. It's as you've seen in, even talking about the last 2 years, 2 years ago, zinc price was doing great. And then, goes into a period where it obviously it's a little bit more challenging. And, it looks like everything is lining up again for a prolonged period of a bull run for some of these metals, and particularly base metals.
Why do you say that? Because, we had Andy Heim, Reuters metals correspondent, and he thinks the zinc price is sort of temporary. I think that he's not expecting it to continue like this. I mean, why do you feel it is going to?
Yeah, and I'm not an analyst, obviously, so I do follow the research reports and what's available in the public domain. So I think some of the bigger things is the supply demand has always been pretty close. It's been pretty razor thin at times. So it doesn't take much for it to move the needle. And you're not talking about a small metal here. Like zinc is the 4th most used metal in the world. So this is not a metal that's very thinly traded or very thinly in terms of the amount produced. The other thing is just the sheer infrastructure spend that the governments are looking to do. And I've seen, it's, whether it's in the Canadian side or whether it's the U.S. side, both governments are saying that there's going to be a major infrastructure spend in the coming years. And who's the biz? Obviously, that involves a lot of steel. The biggest use of zinc is the alloy for steel. So I think that there's a lot of usage there. I think the other kind of wild card out there is just the use of zinc is in batteries and in terms of the EV potential as well. I mean, that's something that it's hard to say how it's going to play out, but there's certainly some neat technology out there that is showing that zinc could replace a lot of the metal in the EV battery going forward.
Okay, so you've got to be confident about the price of zinc for this project, just with the sheer volume of it going forward. How do you manage the polymetallic component, right? So prices rise and fall across all of those commodities, and we've had people come on here who are formerly zinc stories, and all of a sudden they're a silver story because the value of the deposit in the ground changes. So have you any thoughts about how you manage that narrative in the marketplace? Especially when you're going raising capital.
Sure. So I mean, I totally agree with you. Earlier this year, gold is at $2,000, and we have a significant amount of gold in our property. Also silver as well. So, that's the nice thing about being, a diversified mine or a polymetallic mine, is that you have all these elements going at once. It gives us optionality too. When we come to mine construction, you can look at different kind of offtakes or different royalty arrangements, so forth. But overall, I think it's better to be polymetallic and have a diversified asset base for in terms of selling commodities than being a single commodity.
Right, but it also comes down to the recoverability of it all. So again, what do you know about that? Is there any work been done on it?
As I mentioned, we have the benefit that Bleeden did do some metallurgical work, and it's pre 43-101, but it's listed in our 43-101 and what the results were. So it was an excellent report. It was done by SGS or Lakefield, and they still have all the data on file. It's showing that there's great recoveries. It's something like 95% on zinc, and it's especially important on any mining project that the metallurgy work. There's a lot of projects out there that have great numbers, but ultimately the metallurgy kills it. So it's very favorable for us to have a report that shows that these elements separate well. It also helps in terms of the capex. When it'll be a single crushing unit, it should separate well. We've looked at the recovery is good on, especially good on zinc, but it's also on copper, gold, and silver.
Okay.
So we have those four elements that all metallurgically points favorably.
Okay, we'll have a look at that. So a question sent in, I should have asked earlier, when's the next drilling happening at Mariposa?
So our plan is probably end of Q1 of next year.
Okay.
So call it 3 or 4 months away. The great thing about this area that we're in is that you can drill every single day of the year. So 365 days a year. It doesn't matter. So we've done 2 drilling campaigns over the last couple of years. One was in the summer, one was in the winter. There's no difference, So, I haven't talked about it, but one of the key differentiators on this project over others, or competitors or peer groups, is simply infrastructure. So it actually was a past producer. It had some minor production during World War II. It was Hecla was in there. They did about 50,000 tons at around 13% zinc. And so it does have some legacy history there as a producer. In terms of infrastructure, what's key here is that it's like 2 miles away from a major highway, a full paved highway. And electricity, is a hydroelectrical facility, a couple miles away. There's power lines running right through the property. In terms of communities, kind of 45 minutes either way from the property are smaller communities that would house your workforce. So on this property, we wouldn't need to build highways. We wouldn't need to build ports. We wouldn't need to build power or dealing with diesel or transport diesel in. We don't need to build a camp. So these are all things that, if you're talking about a northern project or a project in a third world or remote area, we don't have any of those things. So it's big advantage for us over other projects.
Yeah.
And in terms of getting the product out, you have different refineries. You have some refineries in British Columbia. We have rail nearby. What may even be cheaper is it's a 2.5-hour drive from the site to the Oakland port, where you have access to Korea, China. So those are things that easy access to market. Okay. In terms of service providers, we're a 4-hour drive from Reno, and I've many times flown into Reno and driven from there. So you're talking about all your service providers, your rigs, your assay labs. Like you can drive the core to the assay lab and be back in the same day. Like it's, there's a lot of advantages.
Okay, fantastic. Patrick, thanks very much for running through that. Obviously, looking forward to hearing when you're raising this capital in the new year. Can you not start that process until you've got 100% ownership, or have you already begun conversations?
We've already begun conversations. It's a foregone conclusion. We're getting the project back 100%. We think we'll probably, before we raise the capital, we'll have a something in writing that we have 100%, but it's only 60 days away.
True. And they can't. I mean, Platina, they can't go back into the market because the market it's not as soft as it was. Do they not have the chance of doing that too? Could they turn around to you and say, "Hey, we've got the money. We're going to crack on"?
Well, I mean, they've indicated that they're focusing on gold in Australia. They're closer to home, but they also, just from the agreement itself, they had to drill 10,000 meters by early February of 2021. There's no physical way they can do that.
Easy. 10 rigs. I've thought it through. Right, Patrick. So that's fantastic. Like, thanks for the run through. Appreciate it. Give us a call when you've raised that money and started drilling, because that'd be exciting to see what you guys come up with.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you for your time today.